हे गाइस, सो आज की वीडियो में बात करने वाले हैं ट्रेडिंग इन द जोन बुक पे मार्क डगलस की चैप्टर 5 हम रीड करने वाले हैं वर्ड बाय वर्ड। चैप्टर 1 टू चैप्टर 4 मैंने सेपरेटली वीडियोस में कवर किया हुआ है। ये ट्रेडिंग साइकोलॉजी की बेस्ट बुक है जो कि आप पढ़ सकते हैं मेरे साथ वर्ड बाय वर्ड। आप सोने से पहले या फिर ड्राइव करते हुए भी इसको पढ़ सकते हैं। तो बिना किसी देरी के स्टार्ट करते हैं। लेट्स गेट टू इट। So, Chapter 5, The Dynamics of Perception. One of the primary objectives of this book is to teach you how to take the thread of pain out of market information. The market doesn't generate happy or painful information. From the market's perspective, it's all simply information. It may seem as if the market is causing you to feel the way you do at any given moment, but that's not the case. It's your own mental framework that determines how you perceive the information, how you feel, and as a result, whether or not you are in the most conducive state of mind to spontaneously enter the flow and take advantage of whatever the market is offering. Professionals don't perceive anything about the markets as painful. Therefore, no threat exists for them. If there is no threat, there is nothing to defend against. As a result, there isn't any reason for their conscious or subconscious defense mechanism to kick in. That's why professionals can see and do things that mystify everyone else. They are in the flow because they are perceiving an endless stream of opportunities, and when they are not in the flow, the very best of the best can recognize that fact, then compensate by either scaling back or not trading at all. मतलब कि जो ट्रेडर्स होते हैं, जो कि सक्सेसफुल ट्रेडर हैं, प्रोफेशनल्स हैं, वो हर टाइम पे एक फ्लो में होते हैं। और अगर उनको लगता है कि उनका दिमाग सही से काम नहीं कर रहा, तो वो अपनी पोजीशन की जो साइजिंग है उसको कम कर देते हैं या फिर ट्रेडिंग कुछ टाइम के लिए बंद कर देते हैं। If your goal is to be able to trade like the professionals, you must be able to see the market from an objective perspective without distortion. You must be able to act without resistance or hesitation, but with the appropriate amount of positive restraint to counteract the negative effects of overconfidence or euphoria. In essence, your objective is to able to create a unique state of mind, a trader's mentality. When you have accomplished this, everything else about your success as a trader will fall into place. To help you achieve that objective, I am going to give you a way to redefine your relationship to market information so that there will be little or no potential to perceive any of it as threatening. By redefine, I mean to change your perspective and operate out of mental framework that keeps you focused on the opportunities available instead of tapping you into emotional pain. Debugging your mental software. In other words, we want to get the bug out of your mental software code and get our minds right. Doing this effectively will require an understanding of the nature of mental energy and how can you use that energy to change a perspective that is generating an unwanted negative emotional response to market information. There is much to learn, but I think you will be amazed at how some simple changes can make a huge difference in your trading results. The process of trading starts with perceiving an opportunity. Without the perception of an opportunity, we wouldn't have a reason to trade. So I think it is only fitting that we start our examination of mental energy by breaking down the process of perception. What are the underlying dynamics of perception? What factors determine how we perceive information or what we perceive in relationship to what is available? How is perception connected with what we experience at any given moment? Probably the easiest way to understand the dynamics of perception and answer these questions is to think of everything that forces information about the properties, characteristics, and traits that make them uniquely what they are. Everything that exists outside of our bodies, all plants and all categories of life, all planetary phenomena in the form of weather conditions, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions, all active and physical matter, and all non-corporeal phenomena such as light, sound waves, microwaves, and radiation generates information about the nature of its existence. That information has the potential to act as a force on one of our five physical senses. Before we go any further, notice that I use the verb generate in an all-inclusive way, implying that everything is in an active state of expression, including inanimate objects. To illustrate why I do that, let's look at something as simple as a rock. It's an inanimate object composed of unique atoms and molecules expressing themselves as a rock. I can use the active verb expressing because the atoms and molecules that make up the rock are in constant motion. So even though the rock doesn't appear active except in most abstract sense, it has characteristics and properties that will act as forces on our senses, causing us to experience and make distinctions about the nature of its existence. For example, a rock has texture, and that texture acts as a force on our senses of touch if we run our fingers across the rock surface. A rock has shape and color, which act as a force on our vision. The rock takes up space that no other object can occupy, so that we see it instead of an empty space or some other object. A rock can also have an odor that acts as a force on our sense of smell or taste like something, although I haven't licked any rocks lately to find out. When we encounter anything in the environment that expresses its properties and characteristics, an exchange of energy takes place. Energy from the outside in the form of whatever is expressing itself gets transferred by our nervous system into electrical impulses and then gets stored in our inner mental environment. To be more specific, whatever we are seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, or feeling through our senses gets transformed into electrical impulses of energy and stored in our mental environment as a memory, and I think all of this is fairly self-evident to most people. But there are some profound implications here that aren't self-evident, and we typically take them completely for granted. First of all, there is cause and effect relationship that exists between ourselves and everything else that exists in the external environment. As a result, our encounters with the external forces create what I am going to call energy structures inside our minds. The memories, distinctions, and ultimately the beliefs we acquire throughout our lives exist in our mental environment in the form of structured energy. Structured energy is an abstract concept. You might be asking yourself, how does energy take shape or form? Before I answer this question, an even more fundamental question needs to be addressed. How do we know that memories, distinctions, and beliefs exist in the form of energy in the first place? I don't know if it's been scientifically proven or completely accepted by the scientific community, but ask yourself, in what other form could these mental components exist? Here is what we know for sure. Anything composed of atoms and molecules takes up space and therefore can be observed. If memories, distinctions, and beliefs existed in some physical form, then we should be able to observe them. To my knowledge, no such observations have been made. The scientific community has dissected brain tissue, examined it at the level of individual atom, mapped various regions of the brain in terms of their functions, but nobody as yet have observed a memory, distinction, or belief in its natural form. By in its natural form, I mean that although a scientist can observe the individual brain cells that contain certain memories, he can't experience those memories firsthand. He can only experience them if the person to whom the memories belong is alive and chooses to express them in some way. If memories, distinctions, and beliefs don't exist as physical matter, then there really isn't any alternative way for them to exist except as some form of energy. If this is in fact the case, can this energy take on a specific shape? Can it be structured in a way that reflects the external forces that caused it to come into existence? Most definitely. Is there anything in the environment that is analogous to energy having shape? Thoughts are energy because you think in an language. Your thoughts are structured by the limitations and rules that govern the particular language in which you think. When you express those thoughts aloud, you create sound waves which are a form of energy. The sound waves created by the interaction of your vocal cords and tongue are structured by the content of your message. Microwaves are energy. Many phone calls are relayed by microwaves, which means that the microwave energy has to be structured in a way that reflects the message it is carrying. Laser light is energy, and if you have ever witnessed a demonstration of a laser light show or laser art, what you have seen is pure energy taking a shape that reflects the creative desires of the artist. All of these are good examples of how energy can take shape, form, and structure. Of course, there are many more, but there is one more example that illustrates the point in most graphic way. At the most fundamental level, what are dreams? I am not asking you what dreams mean or what you think their purpose is, but rather what are they? What are their properties? If you assume that dreams take place within the confines of our skulls, then they can't be composed of atoms and molecules because there won't be any enough space for all of the things that exist and take place in our dreams. Dream experiences seem to have some proportions and dimensions as the things we perceive when we are awake and experiencing life through our five senses. The only way this could be possible is if dreams were a form of structured energy because energy can take on any size or dimension but in doing so doesn't actually take up any space. Now, if it hasn't already occurred to you, there's something here that's really profound. If the memories, distinctions, and beliefs we have acquired as a result of our encounters with the external environment represent what we have learned about the environment and how it works, and if these memories, distinctions, and beliefs exist in our mental environment as an energy, and if energy doesn't take up any space, then it also could be said that we have an unlimited capacity of learning. Well, not only do I think it could be said, I am saying it. Consider the development of human consciousness and what to know to function effectively compared to just 100 years ago. There is absolutely nothing to indicate that we don't have an unlimited capacity to learn. The difference between what we are aware of now and what we can do as a result of this expanded awareness would boggle the mind of anyone living 100 years ago. Perception and However, we must be careful not to equate storage capacity with learning capacity. Learning and becoming aware of what is available to be learned is not just a function of storage capacity. If it were, then what would stop us from knowing everything? And if we knew everything, then what would stop us from perceiving every possible characteristic, property, or trait of everything that is expressing itself in any given moment? What stops us now? These questions get to the very heart of why you have to understand that mental components like memories, distinctions, and beliefs exist as energy. Anything that is energy has the potential to act as a force expressing its form, and that is exactly what our memories, distinctions, and beliefs do. They act as a force on our senses from the inside, expressing their form and content, and in the process of doing so, they have a profoundly limiting effect on the information we perceive in any given moment, making much of the information that is available from the environment's perspective and the possibilities inherent within that information literally invisible. I am saying here that in any given moment, the environment is generating an enormous amount of information about its properties, characteristics, and traits. Some of that information is beyond the physiological range of our senses. For example, our eyes can't see every wavelength of light, nor can our ears hear every frequency of sound that environment produces. So there is definitely a range of information that is beyond the physiological capabilities of our senses. What about the rest of the information? The information is generating about itself. Do we see, hear, taste, smell, or feel through our senses every possible distinction, trait, and characteristics being senses? Absolutely not. The energy that inside of us will categorically limit and block our awareness of much of this information by working through the same sensory mechanisms the external environment works through. Now, if you take a moment and think about it, some of what I just said should be self-evident. For example, there are many ways in which the external environment can express itself that we don't perceive simply because we haven't learned about them yet. This is easy to illustrate. Think back for the first time you ever looked at a price chart. What did you see? Exactly what did you perceive? With no previous exposure, I'm sure, like everyone else, you saw a bunch of lines that had no meaning. Now, if you're like most traders, when you look at a price chart, you see characteristics, traits, and behavior patterns that represent the collective actions of all the traders who anticipated in those particular trades. Initially, the chart represented undifferentiated information. Undifferentiated information usually creates a state of confusion. That's probably what you experienced when you first encountered a chart. Gradually, however, you learn to make distinctions about that information, such as trends and trend lines, consolidations, support and resistance, retracements, or significant relationships between volume and open interest, price action, just to name a few. You learn that each of these distinctions in the market's behavior represented an opportunity to fulfill some personal need, goal, or desire. Each distinction now had a meaning and some relative degree of significance or importance attached to it. Now, I want you to use your imagination and pretend that I just set before you the very first price chart you ever saw. Would there be a difference between what you see now and what you saw then? Absolutely. Instead of bunch of lines, you would see everything you have learned about those lines between then and now. In other words, you would see all the distinctions you have learned to make as well as all the opportunities those distinctions represent. Yet everything you can see as you look at that chart now existed then, and furthermore was available to be perceived. So what's the difference? The structured energy that's inside of you now, the knowledge you have gained, acts as a force on your eyes, causing you to recognize the various distinctions that you have learned about. Since that energy wasn't there the first time you looked at the chart, all the opportunities that you now see were there, but they're at the same time invisible to you. Furthermore, unless you have learned to make every possible distinctions based on every possible relationship between the variables in that chart, what you haven't learned yet is still invisible. Most of us have no concept of the extent to which we are continually surrounded by the invisible opportunities inherent in the information we are exposed to. More often than not, we never learn about these opportunities, and as a result, they remain invisible. The problem, of course, is that unless we are in complete new or unique situation, or we are operating out of an attitude of genuine openness, we won't perceive in something that we haven't learned about yet. To learn about something, we have to be able to experience it in some way. So what we have here is a closed loop that prevents us from learning. Perceptual closed loops exist in all of us because they are natural functions of the way mental energy expresses itself in our senses. Everyone has heard the expression, people see what they want to see. I would put it a little differently. People see what they have learned to see, and everything else is invisible until they learn how to counteract the energy that blocks their awareness of whatever is unlearned and waiting to be discovered. To illustrate this concept and make it even clearer, I am going to give you another example, one that demonstrates how mental energy can affect how we perceive and experience the environment in a way that it actually reverses the cause and effect relationship. Let's look at a very young child's first encounter with a dog. Because it's a first experience, the child's mental environment is a clean slate, so to speak, with respect to dog. He won't have any memories and certainly no distinction about a dog's nature. Therefore, up to the moment of the first encounter from the child's perspective, dogs don't exist. Of course, from the environment's perspectives, dogs do exist and they have the potential to act as a force on the child's sense to create an experience. In other words, dogs expressing their nature can act as a cause to produce an effect inside the child's mental environment. What kind of effect are dogs capable of producing? Well, dogs have a range of expression. By range of expression, I mean dogs can behave in a number of ways towards humans. They can be friendly, loving, protective, and fun to play with, or they can be hostile, mean, and dangerous, just to name a few of the many behaviors they are capable of. All of these traits can be observed, experienced, and learned about. When the child sees the dog for the first time, there is absolutely nothing in the mental environment to tell him what he is dealing with. Unfamiliar, unknown, and unclassified environmental information can generate a sense of curiosity. When we want to find out more about what we are experiencing, or it can generate a state of confusion which can easily turn to fear if we can't place the information into an understandable or meaningful organizational framework or context. In our example, the child's sense of curiosity kicks in and he rushes to the dog to get more sensory experience. Notice how children are literally compelled to thrust themselves into a situation they know nothing about. However, in this example, the environmental forces at hand do not react favorably to the child's advances. The dog the child is interested in is either inherently mean or having a bad day. In any case, as soon as the child gets close enough, the dog bites him. सी यहाँ पर जो ऑथर है मार्क डगलस वो ये समझाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं यहाँ पर आप डॉग को समझो कि कोई एक पर्टिकुलर आप ट्रेड ले रहे हो तो ट्रेड आप फर्स्ट टाइम लेने जाते हो और वो ट्रेड आपको लॉस हो जाता है तो यहाँ पर वही चीज़ समझा रहा है कि जैसे कुत्ते ने अगर आपको काट लिया या ट्रेड में आपको लॉस हो गया तो आप अगले ट्रेड में बहुत डर जाओगे और ट्रेड नहीं ले पाओगे और उसी तरीके से यहाँ पर क्या हो रहा है कि बच्चा जो है वो कुत्ते से अब पूरी ज़िंदगी डरता रहेगा क्योंकि कुत्ते ने उसको काट लिया है. The attack is so severe that the dog has to be pulled off the child. This kind of unfortunate experience is certainly not typical, but it's not that uncommon either. I chose it for two reasons. First, most people can relate to it in some way, either from their own direct experience or through the experience of someone they know. Second, as we analyze the underlying dynamics of this experience from an energy perspective, we are going to learn about how our minds are designed to think, process information, how these processes affect what we experience, and our ability to recognize new possibilities. I know this may seem a lot from just one example, but the principles involved apply to the dynamics beneath virtually all learning. As a result of being physically and emotionally traumatized, the little boy in our example now has a memory and one distinction about the way dogs can express themselves. If the boy's ability to remember his experiences is normal, he can store this incident in a way that represents all of the senses that experience had an impact on. For example, the attack can be stored as mental images based on what he saw, as well as mental sounds representing what he heard, and so on. Memories representing the other three senses will work the same way. However, the kind of sensory data in his memory is not as important as the kind of energy the sensory data represents. We basically have two kinds of mental energy: positively charged energy, which we call love, confidence, happiness, joy, satisfaction, excitement, and enthusiasm, to name a few of the pleasant way we can feel, and negatively charged energy, like which representing fear, terror, dissatisfaction, betrayal, regret, anger, confusion, anxiety, stress, and frustration, all representing what is commonly referred to as emotional pain. Because the boy's first experience with a dog was intensely painful, we can assume that regardless of what senses were affected, all of his memories of this experience will be in painful, unpleasant feeling negative energy. Now, what effect will this negatively charged mental energy have on his perception and behavior if and when he encounters another dog? The answer is so obvious that it may seem ridiculous even to ask, but the underlying implications are not obvious. So bear with me. Clearly, the moment he comes into contact with another dog, he will experience fear. Notice that I used the word another to describe the next dog he has any contact with. What I want to point out is that any dog can cause the boy to feel the fear, not just the one that actually attacked him. It won't make a bit of difference if the next dog he comes in contact is the friendliest dog in the world, one whose nature is only to express playfulness and love. The child will still be afraid, and furthermore, his fear could quickly turn into unrestrained terror, especially if the second dog attempts to approach him. Each of us has at one time or another witnessed a situation in which someone was experiencing fear when from other perspective there wasn't the least bit of danger or threat. Although we may not have said it, we probably thought to ourselves that this person was being irrational. Perception and risk. If we tried to point out why there was no need to be afraid, we probably found out that our words had little, if any, impact. We could easily think that same thing about the boy in our example, that he is just being irrational because it's clear from our perspective that other possibilities exist than the one his mind has focused on. But is his fear any less rational than, let's say, your fear about putting on the next trade when your last trade was a loser? Using the same logic, a top trader would say that your fear is irrational because this now moment opportunity has absolutely nothing to do with your last trade. Each trade is simply an edge with a probable outcome and statistically independent of every other trade. If you believe otherwise, then I can see why you're afraid. But I can assure you that your fears are completely unfounded. As you can see, one person's perception of risk can easily be perceived as irrational thinking by another. Risk is relative, but to the person who perceives it in the moment it seems absolute and beyond question. When the child encountered his first dog, he was bubbling with excitement and curiosity. What is it about the way our minds think and process information that could automatically flip the boy into a state of fear the next time he encounters a dog, even if it's months or years later? If we look at fear as a natural mechanism warning us of threatening conditions, then what is it about the way our minds function that would automatically tell the boy that the next encounter with a dog is something to be afraid of? What happened to boy's natural sense of curiosity? There is surely more to learn about the nature of dogs than this one experience has taught him, especially in the light of the fact that our minds seem to have an unlimited capacity for learning, and why would it be virtually impossible to talk the boy out of his fear? The power of association. As complex as these questions may seem at first glance, most of them can be answered quite easily. I am sure many of you already know the answer. Our minds have an inherent design characteristic that causes us to associate and link anything that exists in the external environment that is similar in quality, characteristics, properties, or traits to anything that already exists in our mental environment as a memory or distinctions. In other words, in the example of the child being afraid of dogs, the second dog or any other dog he encounters thereafter doesn't have to be the dog that attacked in order for him to experience emotional pain. There just has to be enough of a likeness or similarity for his mind to make a connection between the two. This natural tendency for our minds to associate is an unconscious mental function that occurs automatically. It's not something we have to think about or make a decision about. An unconscious mental function would be analogous to an involuntary physical function such as heartbeat. Just as we don't have to consciously think about the process of making our hearts beat, we don't have to think about linking experiences and our feelings about them. It's simply a natural function of the way our minds process information, and like a heartbeat, it's a function that has a profound effect on the way we experience our lives. I'd like you to try and visualize the two-way flow of energy that reverses the cause and effect relationship that will make it difficult for the boy to perceive any other possibilities than the one that's in his mind. To help you, I'm going to break this process down into smallest parts and go through what happens step by step. All of this may seem a bit abstract, but understanding this process plays a big part in unlocking your potential to achieve consistent success as a big trader. First, let's get right down to the basics. There is structured energy on the outside of the boy and structured energy on the inside of the boy. The outside energy is positively charged in the form of a friendly dog that wants to express itself by playing. The inside energy is a negatively charged memory in the form of mental images and sounds that represent the boy's first experience with a dog. Both the inside and the outside energy have the potential to make themselves felt on the boy's senses and as a result create two different kinds of situations for him to experience. The outside energy has the potential to act as a force on the boy in a way that he could find very enjoyable. This particular dog expresses behavior characteristics like playfulness, friendliness, and even love. But keep in mind that these are characteristics that the child still has not experienced in a dog, so from his perspective, they don't exist. Just as in the price chart example I presented earlier, the child won't be able to perceive what he hasn't yet learned about unless he is in a state of mind that is conducive to learning. The inside energy also has potential and is just waiting, so to speak, to express itself, but will act on the boy's eyes and ears in a way that causes him to feel threatened. This in turn will create an experience of emotional pain, fear, and possibly even terror. From the way I have set this up, it may seem as if the boy has a choice between experiencing fun or experiencing fear. That's really not the case, at least not in the moment. Of the two possibilities that exist in this situation, he will undoubtedly experience the pain and fear instead of the fun. This is true for several reasons. First, as I have already indicated, our minds are wired to automatically and instantaneously associate a link information that has similar characteristics, properties, and traits. What's outside of the child in the form of a dog looks and sounds familiar to one that's in his mind. However, the degree of similarity that is necessary for his mind to link the two is an unknown variable, meaning I don't know the mental mechanism that determines how much or how little similarity is required for our minds to associate and link two or more sets of information. Since everyone's mind functions in a similar way but at the same time is unique, I would assume there is a range of tolerance for similarity or dissimilarity, and each of us has a unique capacity somewhere within the range. Here is what we do know. As this next dog comes into contact with the boy's eyes or ears, if there is enough similarity between the way it looks or sounds and the dog that's embedded in his memory, then his mind will automatically connect the two. This connection in turn will cause the negatively charged energy in his memory to be released throughout his body, causing him to be overcome with a very uncomfortable sense of foreboding or terror. The degree of discomfort or emotional pain that he experiences will be equivalent to the degree of trauma that he suffered as a result of his first encounter with a dog. What happens next is what psychologists call a projection. I'm going to refer to it as simply as another instantaneous association that makes the reality of the situation from the boy's perspective seem like an absolute, unquestionable truth. The boy's body is now filled with negatively charged energy. At the same time, he is in sensory contact with the dog. Next, his mind associates whatever sensory information his eyes or ears perceive with the painful energy he is experiencing inside himself, which makes it seem as if the source of his pain and fear is the dog he is seeing or hearing in that moment. Psychologists call the dynamics of what I have just described projection because, in a sense, the boy is projecting the pain he is experiencing in the moment onto the dog. That painful energy then gets reflected back to him so that he perceives a dog that is threatening, painful, and dangerous. This process makes the second dog identical in character, properties, and traits to the one that is in the boy's memory bank, even though the information the second dog is generating about its behavior is not identical or even similar to the behavior of dog that actually attacked the boy. Since the two dogs, the one in the boy's mind and the one outside of the boy's mind, feel exactly the same, it's extremely unlikely the boy will be able to make any type of distinctions in the second dog's behavior that would suggest to him that it is any different than the one in his mind. So instead of perceiving this next encounter with a dog as an opportunity to experience something new about the nature of dogs, he perceives a threatening and dangerous dog. Now, if you think about it for a moment, what is it about this process that would indicate to the boy that his experience of this situation was not the absolute unquestionable truth? Certainly, the pain and fear that he experienced in his body was the absolute truth. But what about the possibilities that he perceived? Were they true? From our perspective, they weren't. However, from the boy's perspective, how could they be anything but the true reality of this situation? What alternatives did he have? First, he can't perceive possibilities that he hasn't learned about yet. And it is extremely difficult to learn anything new if you are afraid because, as you already well know, fear is very debilitating form of energy. It causes us to withdraw, to get ready, to protect ourselves, to run and narrow our focus of attention. All of which makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to open ourselves in a way that allows us to learn something new. Second, as I have already indicated, as far as the boy is concerned, the dog is the source of his pain, and in a sense, this is true. The second dog did cause him to tap into the pain that was already in his mind, but it was not the true source of that pain. This was a positively charged dog that got connected to the boy's negatively charged energy by an automatic involuntary mental process functioning at speeds faster than it takes to blink an eye. So as far as he's concerned, why wouldn't he be afraid if what he perceived about the dog wasn't the absolute truth? As you can see, it wouldn't make any difference how the dog was acting or what someone might say to the contrary about why the boy shouldn't be afraid, because he will perceive whatever information the dog is generating about itself from a negative perspective. He will not have the slightest notion that his experience of pain, fear, and terror was completely self generated. Now, if it's possible for the boy to self generate his own pain and terror at the same time, be firmly convinced that his negative energy experience was coming from the environment. It's also possible for traders to self generate their own experiences of fear and emotional pain as they interact with markets information and be thoroughly convinced that their pain and fear was completely justified by the circumstances. The underlying psychological dynamic work in exactly the same way. One of our basic objectives as a trader is to perceive the opportunities available, not the threat of pain. To learn how to stay focused on the opportunities, you need to know and understand in no certain terms the source of the threat. It's not the market. The market generates information about its potential to move from a neutral perspective. At the same time, it provides you with an unending stream of opportunities to do something on your own behalf. If what you perceive at any given moment causes you to feel fear, ask yourself this question. Is this information inherently threatening, or are you simply experiencing the effect of your own state of mind reflecting back to you? I know this is a difficult concept to accept, so I'll give you another example to illustrate the point. Let's set up a scenario where your last two or three traders were losers. You are watching the market and the variables you used to indicate that an opportunity exists are now present. Instead of immediately executing the trade, you hesitate. The trade feels very risky, so risky, in fact, that you start questioning whether this is really a signal. As a result, you start gathering information to support why this trade probably won't work. This is information you normally wouldn't consider or pay attention to, and it's certainly not information that is part of your trading methodology. In the meantime, the market is moving. Unfortunately, it is moving away from your original entry point, the point at which you would have gotten into trade if you hadn't hesitated. Now, you are conflicted because you still want to get in. The thought of missing a winning trade is painful. At the same time, as the market moves away from your entry point, the dollar value of the risk to participate increases. The tug of war inside your mind intensifies. You don't want to miss out, but you don't want to get whipsawed either. In the end, you do nothing because you are paralyzed by the conflict. You justify your state of immobility by telling yourself that it is just too risky to chase the market, while you agonize on every tick the market moves in the direction of what would have been a nice winning trade. If this scenario sounds familiar, I want you to ask yourself whether at the moment you hesitated, were you perceiving what the market was making available or perceiving what was in your mind reflected back to you. The market gave you a signal, but you didn't perceive the signal from an objective or positive perspective. You didn't see it as an opportunity to experience the positive feeling you would get from winning or making money, but that's exactly what the market was making available to you. Think about this for a moment. If I change the scenario so that your last two or three trades were winners instead of losers, would you have perceived the signal any differently? Would you have perceived it more as an opportunity to win than you did in the first scenario? If you were coming off three winners in a row, would you have hesitated to put that trade on? Very unlikely. In fact, if you are like most traders, you probably would have been given very strong consideration to loading up. In each situation, the market generated the same signal. But your state of mind was negative and fear based in the first scenario, and that caused you to focus on the possibility of failure, which in turn caused you to hesitate. In the second scenario, you hardly perceived any risk at all. You may even have thought the market was making a dream come true. That in turn would make it easy, if not compelling, to financially overcome it yourself. If you can accept the fact that the market doesn't generate positively or negatively charged information as an inherent characteristics of the way it expresses itself, then the only other information can take on a positive or negatively charged is in your mind, and that is a function of the way the information is processed. In other words, the market doesn't cause you to focus on failure and pain or on winning and pleasure. What causes the information to take on a positive or negative quality is the same unconscious mental process that caused the boy to perceive the second dog as threatening and dangerous when all the dog was offering was playfulness and friendship. Our minds constantly associate what's outside of us with something that's already in our mind, making it seem as if the outside circumstances and the memory, distinction, or belief these circumstances are associated with are exactly the same. As a result, in the first scenario, if you were coming off 2 or 3 losing trades, the next signal the market gives you that an opportunity was present will feel overly risky. Your mind is automatically and unconsciously linking the now moment with your most recent trading experiences. The link taps you into the pain of losing, creating a fearful state of mind and causing you to perceive the information you are exposed to in that moment from a negative perspective. It seems as if the market is expressing threatening information, so of course your hesitation is justified. In the second scenario, the same process causes you to perceive the situation from an overly positive perspective because you are coming off 3 winners in a row. The association between the now moment and the elation of the last 3 trades creates an overly positive or euphoric state of mind, making it seem as if the market is offering you a riskless opportunity. Of course, this justifies overcommitting yourself. In chapter 1, I said that many of the mental patterns that cause traders to lose and make errors are so self-evident and deeply ingrained that it would never occur to us that the reason we are consistently successful is because of the way we think. Understanding, becoming consciously aware of, and then learning how to circumvent the mind natural property to associate is a big part of achieving that consistency. Developing and maintaining a state of mind that perceives the opportunity flow of the market without the threat of pain or the problems caused by overconfidence will require to take conscious control of the association process. सो यहीं तक रखेंगे चैप्टर 5 एंड चैप्टर 6 करेंगे अगले वीडियो में. आई होप कि आपको इस बुक से काफ़ी हेल्प मिली होगी. चैप्टर 5 काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंट था. अब चैप्टर 6 पे हम बात करेंगे अगले वीडियो में. तो मिलते हैं आपसे अगले वीडियो में. तब तक के लिए टेक केयर. सी यू. बाय.